Hello and welcome to my latest video on how to authenticate with Microsoft Graph API and Python. In this video, I will be diving into the world of Microsoft's Graph API and showing you how to access its resources and perform various operations. The Microsoft Graph API is a unified API endpoint for accessing data across Microsoft 365 services, including SharePoint, OneDrive, and more. With the help of Python, I'll show you how to obtain the necessary authentication token to use it to interact with the Graph API in a secure and efficient manner. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn how to do that. So let me start with describing the goal we want to achieve. So I have my demo account of Microsoft for the development purposes, and it has some data in it. So we have a couple of users automatically created. These are some dummy data. These are fake people, so they are not really actual users and not real identities. So our goal is going to be use Graph API to actually get those names. And first of all, let me create a Python project. So to do that, I'm going to create a virtual environment. And I'm going to activate it. Source. Let me open up Visual Studio Code. And I have a couple of libraries I like to use for my development. So the linter, which in my case I use Flake8, Black and iSort for automatic formatting of my code. However, the two libraries or two packages we are going to need to use Graph API, to connect with Graph API, is the msal, which stands for Microsoft Authentication Library, and we are going to use requests to basically make some basic HTTP REST calls to the Graph API. So let me install those. Let me install those requirements, and we should be good to go. Now let me create a graph demo file that we are gonna put our code into so that we can actually start development. So I think we are ready, and yeah, so let's import msal. What we are going to do, what we need basically to authenticate is a couple of things. So client ID, client secret, and tenant ID. So let's go to our Azure Portal and let's figure out what we need. So we need an application, or we need a user, some sort of a user. And in Microsoft world, this user, this technical user, is called app registration. So we need to basically have an application. This application will then have permissions, and it will be able to authenticate and authorize to make API calls. So I have created an application, and this application is sometimes called a client, and it has ID. UUID for it, so we need that, and we need that we will need that for our code, and we need as well the tenant ID and secret. The tenant ID is sometimes called directory ID, so let me copy this one, and then the client secret. Client secret is basically like a password for our application, and we can create a secret for our application here. By default there is no secret, so let me create this secret. Let me copy it. We have this secret in the value, and we should be good to go. I'm going to remove this data, so I'm not really worried about showing you that. However, of course, your secret should be kept somewhere, not in the code, but somewhere else, like in the key vault or environment variables of your system that you have. But for the purpose of this video, I'm gonna just leave it in the code itself. So we have our application, we have the password for our application, or the secret. However, the application requires specific permissions. So in the API permissions, we need a couple of things. So to get the users from the Graph API, we will need a couple of permissions. So make sure that you select the application permissions. So I've clicked on add permissions and then application permissions, and we're going to go for users. And I'm just going to go user read all. And we might need as well directory to access direct Microsoft Azure Access Directory. So I'm going to go and read all. Now you will notice that it is not granted for Microsoft here. So let me grant those permissions. Let me consent. And once we should see now green check marks. So it means that we are good to go. And these permissions are granted now for our application. Actually, from msal, let's import confidential client application. So we want to create something that's called a confidential client application. This confidential client application requires a couple of input parameters. So client ID. It requires client credentials. And it's going to be our client secret. And requires as well authority. Authority is basically like a string that we need to provide. So we need to tell Microsoft what we want to authenticate with. And this msal authority is basically a string that ends with our tenant ID. So I have actually prepared this link. So that's the link itself. So login.microsoftonline.com/tenant ID. And now we will be able to get our application. So to obtain the token, we need to ask our application for the token itself. So let's go for it. Msal application acquire. I'm not sure why it doesn't. Acquire token silent. Not sure why it's not helping me out with some smart. Okay. What do we need to provide here to acquire the token is something that's called scope. We don't have the scope defined yet. But let me define it. So scope basically is a list of stuff that we want to get access to. And in our case, it's going to be Microsoft Graph default scope. So we want to use the default permissions of our client, of our application. Acquire token silent. This will try to obtain the token from the cache. However, if it will fail, we have to use a different, let's say, method. So we need to check. If not, result, then result is equal to msal add acquire token for client. This one doesn't require the account. So if you will fail here, we're going to do it here. Don't ask me why it couldn't be done in one go. It is what it is. So now let's check if we actually have our access token. If our access token is present in the result, otherwise we want to raise an exception. Access token found. Cool. Let's actually try to see if we get this access token. I'm going to run this code, and we probably should get it already. Okay, so you can see that I was able to obtain the access token. So it looks that we are good to go. Now, once we have the access token, we can use it in the header to actually authenticate with our with the Graph API. So let me import requests, and now we're going to do response requests get a URL. So we need a URL. Graph API has its own URL, so we need to know it, and we can of course get it from the documentation. That's the URL, and I want to get the users. In order to authenticate with the Graph API, we need to provide a header with the bearer and the token. Headers. Let me actually create some headers. So headers, our headers should be authorization. Actually, now, and then the content type application JSON. So I have those two prepared, so just not to make any typo. And now if you provide those headers, you should be able to get the users. And now let's see if we'll get the users. Let me pretty print that. Print JSON dumps response JSON dump 4. So that should give us a little bit more prettier output of what we want to get. So let's see if we are gonna be successful to obtain our list of users. Yay! So you can see that we were actually successful and we were able to get our users. So you can see that there are some users here. Let's say Adele V. We should probably see the Adele V in our users. So let's see. Yeah, Adele V. You can see that this is the person, and if we go to the details of that person, we should get the membership and all the other stuff for that person. So, and that's it, I think, for the video. So in it, I was able to show you how to authenticate with Microsoft Graph API with Python. I hope you found it informative and helpful. In case of any questions or comments, leave a comment, and don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date with other videos I will be making. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.